we got mod mail from the principal investigator of this experiment, letting us know what had happened and asked us to assist them with debriefing our community. I was the one that opened that original message.
Okay.
And, my first thought was, they fucking did what?
This week on Influence, it's how to change someone's mind and why an AI experiment almost ruined one of the best places on the internet. Internet travelers, welcome back to Influence with me, Matt Silverman, the host of the show, obsessed with internet culture, online communities, the creative people that make the internet worth interneting. And we talk to a lot of influencers. We talk to the Instagrammers, the TikTokers, the podcasters, the YouTubers of the world. But as you know, if you know me, I am obsessed with platform culture, Reddit culture in particular. We have covered it nigh 10,000 times on this very feed over the many years we've been doing this show. And we love to dig in on the communities that are related to specific interests and fandoms and creativity. But the show I have for you today is very specific because I think that this is a place that is truly unique on the internet. I have never come across it, anything quite like it in my internet travels. And I want to just distinguish it because, like, hey, if you like whatever you like, horror movies, then there's a subreddit for horror movies, but there's also going to be web forums, and there's also going to be Instagram accounts, and there's also going to be a million YouTube channels. But this is a place that I guess could function in other modalities on the web, but there's something about subreddits and conversations and comment structures and the culture of Reddit that lends itself to this community. And I am very excited to talk about it at large because I am a longtime reader and observer. I don't think I've ever posted in there. We'll see. But then something happened on this subreddit very recently that I became fascinated with, and I reached out to the moderators, and I am very pleased to be bringing you a conversation with one of them. The subreddit in question is called r/ChangeMyView, and it is a community with nearly 4 million users. Maybe we've crossed that threshold by the time I wrote these notes down. It is a place, and I'm going to quote the sidebar here, a place to post an opinion you accept that may be flawed in an effort to understand other perspectives on the issue. Enter with a mindset for conversation, not debate. And we're going to expand upon that in a moment, but in an internet that is so filled with filter bubbles and echo chambers, a place and a platform where people are coming to the table in good faith to say, I believe this, please tell me if and why I am wrong, is extraordinary. And I'm very excited to talk about that community today and also to dig in on some research, a social experiment, and perhaps some ethics violations that happened in the subreddit very recently that has made news. And I am really thrilled that it has brought Logan MacGregor, who is a moderator of ChangeMyView, to the podcast. Logan, welcome to Influence. Hello.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, audio listeners, you hear Logan. He's ready to talk. Video watchers, you may notice that Logan is not visible on camera today because we are, we're going to be separating the Reddit user from the person. And, these are dicey things. So we're keeping Logan somewhat anonymous visually, but also he's been on the record talking about the community and this issue. So welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So why don't you give us an overview of the community? What is its purpose beyond, of course, the little tagline that I read, and tell us about your history there as a user and now as a moderator.
Happy to. Like, this is one of the, I would say, last remaining places on social media where people can have genuine conversations.
Hmm.
And so I'm not what you would call an avid social media user. About 15 years ago, I deleted all my Facebook stuff and just completely separated myself from social media because there's just too much vitriol. And I didn't like what it was doing to my real life communities. And I kind of checked out. I said, no, I'm done. And I know that people were like, oh, send us the pictures of the family or your latest vacation or what you had for lunch on Friday, and or pictures of your cats. And I know that people were enjoying that at the time, but to me, I didn't like what it did to me emotionally, so I just completely separated it. And
Hmm.
I was looking for something to do, and I said, well, Reddit is actually not that bad. They have, remember the human. And so I started just kind of lurking. I participated in some hiking subs and some, animals being derps was one of my favorite ones because, just
Oh, I
that.
don't know that one. All
Oh,
right.
it's a great one. All the animals do all their crazy poses and everything, and it was just a nice way
See,
to pass time.
my subreddit of preference in that vein is r/kids are fucking stupid, which is just
I've seen that one.
gifs and videos and Twitter screenshots of children saying and doing the dumbest things ever, including falling over and hopefully not getting hurt. And so that's the derp subreddit for me.
I have seen that one, and as a dad, it's pretty funny. So,
There you go.
and then like I found myself doing what I told myself I wouldn't do, and that is participating in some political discussions. And
Okay.
quite frankly, I was doing what everyone else was doing, and which is calling everyone else an asshole.
Hmm.
And then I stumbled across Change My View, and I got my own comment removed for Rule 2, which
Okay.
is don't be rude to other users.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and of course, like first reaction was, who the hell are these mods to remove my comment?
And just for context, like so many of the listeners here, I'm sure if they don't participate or even moderate their own subreddits, they probably know. But for lay people, like every subreddit community has very specific ground rules which you need to adhere to before posting or commenting, and if you are perceived to violate any of them, that can cause removal or discussion from moderators. That's what you're referring to when you say rule 2, of course, right?
Correct. There's some rules on the sub, and there are a set of rules for people who make posts, and then there are people who challenge the views of the people that make the posts, and they have certain conduct rules. And so once I got over that initial shock of having my comment removed, I kind of looked. I kind of did what I should have done, which is really look at the rules of the sub. And
Hmm.
I was just astounded. I was amazed. I was impressed by the level of detail that went into the rules of the sub. And
Mm.
I quickly identified it as a really special space. And then I
Yeah.
became kind of obsessed with the sub, and racked up a ton of deltas, which
Hmm.
is when you effectively change another's view, and through and I really liked that it forced me to engage in civil discourse. And I just really felt that this is what not just online communities in general were lacking, because there's so much vitriol everywhere else, but
Yeah.
that just in terms of where we're at in like the socio-political zeitgeist, being able to just have conversations about anything, whether it's
Yeah.
abortion or the Israel-Palestine war or politics. And literally you can have a conversation about any topic, and you can have divergent opinions, like really fierce disagreements, but then there's this opportunity for views to change. And
Mm.
then I realized that this thing is so deep. It goes back 20 or more years. There's research on it, and that certain conditions must be present for people to change views. And I was reading at the time a book by Bohm called On Dialogue, and it just struck me as something that was desperately needed. And I was just impressed with the sub. And so that was my experience getting into it. And it's just such a special place. And so, yeah, that's what the sub is about. Just, come with whatever view you want. And, as long as these preconditions are met, we can have a place where people can come together and work it out. And I don't know of any other place where you can have a genuine conversation of, say, abortion or whether God exists or, whatever might be on your mind.
Right. I think the secret sauce here that you've identified are two things. It's the very specific format and rules that are in place, but then also like, people are coming in good faith to have a discussion because I don't think that's typical of people, especially on the internet. Like I think when people go to the internet to say something, they are there to proclaim it rather than to open a dialogue. So I guess it has created this culture, but I think we're also honing in on a subset of people who are like, I think X about abortion. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think? Like that's just I can't think of any people who are like that. You know what I mean? So I guess like I'm saying it's a special collective of people coming in. Does that make sense? And do you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. That is the mindset that you need to have when you enter the sub. And it's really interesting because, one of the frustrations we'll get is that, oh, this person doesn't want to change their view. And that, I think that's a really interesting distinction because I don't think it's necessary to want to change your view. You just have to be willing to do so. And
that's an important distinction.
And that's really what we're looking for is open-mindedness, just the ability to have a conversation at normal civil discourse, which unfortunately isn't so normal anymore.
What I really like about certain threads is like, I think this about topic X, and they give a whole litany of reasons and philosophical arguments, and it's all there. And then the top commenter, or maybe the person who gets the delta, is like, well, everything you're saying, I would say is rational and factual, but the like philosophical thrust of your argument presupposes X. Therefore, I don't disagree with you, but I think your argument is flawed. And that opens up like a more epistemological discussion about how we are talking about topics. You know what I mean? And I find that really fascinating on the sub, like digging into those discussions.
That is, but unfortunately, that's actually an example of something that's against the rules.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so,
okay. Tell me more.
So rule 1 says that, all top level comments need to challenge the original post or OP. And saying that they're right for the wrong reasons isn't a challenge. So we often see those kind of discussions lower on in the thread, and there's nothing wrong with getting into that. And so that's sort of a tertiary benefit of having this kind of discourse. But really, if somebody says, I think I think the new Batman movie was sucks. Then they have to explain why the new Batman movie sucks, and so you have to challenge them in such a way that it's actually going after their main view that Batman movie sucks. You can't say that they're right for the wrong reasons, and so those conversations, especially on really popular topics like politics and abortion and international conflict, those things definitely happen because some of the posts get thousands of comments, and those conversations do happen. But really, it's it's about getting to this very vulnerable space of being open to changing your view. And I can say, as somebody who has posted
Mhm.
change my views, that I think I think people underestimate how vulnerable that makes you, because
Interesting.
because people will come at you with things that you honestly did not think of before,
Okay.
and your first impulse is that's wrong, but
Yeah.
but then you really have to think about it. You're like, yeah,
Right.
I hadn't thought about it that way. And
Hmm.
so, the delta is not, necessarily a complete reversal where, like, if I say, the Batman movie sucks, and somebody says, well, it doesn't suck that bad because of X, Y, and Z, and then I might give a delta to that person because they made me think of the Batman movie in a way that I hadn't thought of before. So that's kind of the
Right.
game that we play.
Yes, yes. And again, housekeeping for people who are not familiar with the sub, a delta, which is what is it? It's the Greek letter, Greek symbol for change, right? Or
Yeah,
mathematical
pretty
symbol.
much. Yeah.
You are awarding an upvote to the person who changed your view, and that becomes a delta, like a point for them in the culture of the subreddit, right?
Kind of, yeah. And it's also a nice tracking tool because, especially for complex views, you can get multiple changes that happen in the conversation.
Mm.
And if somebody has already successfully challenged one of the points, you want to have some sort of scoring system that the community can see, like, oh, this point has already been successfully challenged. I'm going to move on to a different aspect of the view.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is I would say a polite recognition, a
Hmm.
sort of gratitude, but also a really nice conversation tracker. And
Hmm.
as I understand that, its original intent was just to track the conversation, but then
Okay.
the community was like, hey, yeah, I got deltas, and people started keeping track of how many deltas they had, and
That's
then
fine.
we just facilitated that.
Yeah, it's not gamified per se, but it is a social currency of contributions or discussions or participation, which
Yeah,
is what it's all about
yeah.
on this sub in particular. So you've alluded, of course, to like the hottest button topics, but do you have examples of notable or popular or legendary topics that have been posted that spurred a lot of changes of view or discussion, or are there topics that come up again and again and again that people seem very eager to put forth of like, this is my core belief about, as you alluded to, religion and God, please tell me why you think differently. Like what do you see over time
Well, we
in the
definitely
culture?
see some popular posts, and you can search the archives, and you can see, abortion is very popular, politics is very popular. You have your pro left politics, you have your pro right politics. We get all stripes. Um, you know, um, assisted suicide is one of the more
Mm,
controversial ones, and whether or not a person should have a right to have that comes up a lot.
mhm.
Generally, it really just follows the news cycle, and so, like,
Yep.
during the experiment that the University of Zurich did was, I would say, peak traffic time, because
Mm,
there was an election happening, and there was the inauguration of President Trump, and people
mhm.
had lots of thoughts about what they felt about that. And so, politics was sort of the theme of the day. And economic policy is something that comes up, whether the degree to which government should assist citizens. Gun rights comes up, like, really everything. And then we get stuff about music and video
Mhm.
games. So it's not always those hot button issues. Sometimes people will you know talk about. There was one that our moderator, one of our moderators, put up, which was, and we participate in this up too because we love it. It was about whether the background music was appropriate in grocery stores, and so that was and that was that was something we did on Fresh Topic Friday, which is something we do every Friday.
I need to
Where
think about my position on this this very important issue.
You're welcome to continue to comment. It's a couple weeks old now, but it's up there.
I need to get in there.
But every Friday we say, okay, we're gonna hit the pause button, and only really fresh topics can come up. And so that's kind of how we keep things interesting, where we kind of take a break from relationships and politics and whatever tends to be the most common topics, and really provide a space for fresh things, I guess. Yeah.
People on the internet discussing feverishly about topics that have no stakes at whatsoever is my favorite kind of internet. So I do love the supermarket music idea, and people just saying like this movie, this game should be this or that. As I'm a big fan of that. You alluded to the study by the University of Zurich, which we're going to cover in depth momentarily. But before we get there, there must be people coming into the sub with bad intent. And I don't really know what that would look like. I'm sure you do. What do you do with people who are, I don't know, they're breaking the rules, they're argumentative, they're getting heated, or maybe even they're posting things. They're posting, top level posts with some agenda, like they're trying to fire people up. They're not there to get their view changed. They're there for some other reason. And then you as moderators are like, wait a minute, this guy's a problem. Like, what does that look like? How do you deal with it?
Well, and I think we're a very process oriented sub. So one of the things that, we like to do is like, people aren't the problem. The way that the sub supports the community is the process. And so, we have a whole bunch of moderation standards that we follow in terms of how we address rule violating behavior. But I think the thing that you're talking about here is what we call soapboxing, right? That somebody, isn't really demonstrating a willingness to change their view. They're not really open-minded. And I think it's important to kind of take a step back, because I think really there's three buckets of posts. There's somebody who has done kind of the internal work and is ready to be vulnerable in that space, and they're completely open to changing their view. And that's very apparent. And then there's somebody who thinks that they are ready to have their view challenged, but
that's a very interesting distinction. That's
as soon as they're confronted with reality, they I think unintentionally fall back to their default mode of being argumentative and treating it like a debate instead of a conversation. And then you have folks that really are there to soapbox. And one of the things that we do, we have a post rule called Rule B, which means that you basically must be open-minded, and you must actually demonstrate a willingness to change your view. And so obviously we can't read minds, but our wiki has, a set of a dozen behaviors that we say, hey, if you exhibit any of these in your post, we're going to consider it for Rule B. And we realize that that's subjective. And so we have safeguards put in place so that the mods aren't too heavy-handed when removing posts for soapboxing. And the first safeguard is it takes 2 mods to agree that soapboxing is happening before the post is removed.
It's just that gut check of like, I think this, but what do you think? And if 2 people see it, then you escalate it.
Yeah, and then on the back end, if the user disagrees with us and say, no, I'm not soapboxing, then it takes 2 more mods to affirm the removal.
Okay, great.
And so the deference...
Checks and balances. This is a legislative process here, the likes of which we haven't seen.
Whole bunch of due process in the thing.
Due process.
and you compare that to other subs where, they'll ban you just for being a member of a sub that they disagree with. And then the dialogue that we have with people, like someone will say, hey, what was rude about my comment? And we'll get in depth about why it violates the rules, and will allow them to provide an alternative explanation, and the tie always goes to the user. It goes to the
Okay.
person. So
Mm-hmm.
if the mods don't agree that this was in fact a rule violation, we just restore the comment. And
Yeah,
so
great.
we're really just cultivating a community. And we unfortunately, not everyone is here in good faith, but we have, I think, a robust system to kind of ensure that overall the sub does what it should do.
Yeah. This is fascinating. I'm really glad you were able to outline this because I've never moderated a sub before, so I know there's so many differences between the cultures of these subreddits. Well, all right. For listeners, I will say that we are about to take a break. I do not have trivia for Logan. We always do a trivia segment, but this was going to be a different format of a show, and we were going to think about this differently and kind of like squeeze in a more concise discussion. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, as Logan alluded to, the University of Zurich did an experiment in the subreddit without the knowledge or consent of the users, and it's really fascinating and controversial, and we're going to talk about that right after this important message. It's time to thank the people who make the show possible over at patreon.com/influencepod. Those folks who contribute at the producer tier, including Sam, Jolene Jula, Evan, Robert Tortorelli, and of course, the gold legacy tier member. What do we call these people? The god tier. It's the super user. I don't know. But they've been with us for a long time, and you know who you are. You're William. You're Dominic Kerr. You're Duran, and you are Bowie Barks. Thank you to all the folks who support the show at any tier, even the free one, over at patreon.com/influencepod. Algorithm-free content. That'd be nice. And now, we got to find out all about this really it's this fascinating, compelling, scary experiment that went down over at r/ChangeMyView. Logan's going to explain it to us right now. We're back with Logan MacGregor, a moderator of the subreddit r/ChangeMyView, who has given us a really nice overview of the culture and the mechanics of the subreddit and how moderation works and how the community functions. I couldn't believe it has 4 million subscribers. I always, in my brain, I just imagined it being smaller than that, maybe a couple 100,000. Do you know how long it's been running? Or I think I wrote it down, but I don't have it here. Like it's been online for many years, like 10, 15 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't know how long we've been on Reddit because I've only been moderating for a few months. But the history of this goes back easily 20 years.
20 years, yeah,
and then maybe a little bit before that, because we were we had various online web-based kind of stuff before we went on to social media.
Okay. Do you happen to know, like, was there a singular founder or creator of the sub or the initiative that became the subreddit? Is that known at this time?
That is known. I don't personally know it.
Okay.
But there was a champion of this thing. I just can't remember his name off the top of my head.
I was because sometimes it's like, the moderators change hands and people come and go. So like, is that username lost to time, or is there a record of it? I was just genuinely curious if there is
no, and like the head mod is probably wringing his hands right now because I guess it's like, oh, you should say my name, but
sure.
the person is out there and they're well respected in the research community, and I could probably dig it up after the show, but
sure. No,
I'm sorry, I'm too new. I don't know the name of it.
So, all right. Before the break, we alluded to this study, this research from the University of Zurich. Why don't you give us an overview of what went down, and then we'll talk about what it meant for the community.
Yeah. So in the middle of March, we got mod mail, which is basically a shared email box for moderators from the principal investigator of this experiment, letting us know what had happened. And asked us to assist them with debriefing our community. And I was the one that opened that original message.
Okay.
And my first thought was, they fucking did what? I was just I couldn't believe it. And my first thought was, oh, is this a joke? And then I quickly realized, no, I've actually seen some of these things on the sub, and we weren't quite sure if they were a bot, and it was real. And the research team was very forthcoming. They gave us a list of the accounts that were used, and we were able to actually validate that this had actually happened. And oh yeah, those are definitely bots. And then we had to figure out what to do with it, right? Because there were 13 bots that were used on the sub, and I think that it's kind of inflated a bit in the popular media because 13 accounts on a sub that has 4 million subscribers,
right?
One of the findings was, it was undetected on the sub, and I'm like, 13 bad actors on the sub of 4 million users, okay, so you slipped through the radar, but that it doesn't.
Yes and no, because if the comments created by those accounts were the top comments of a very hot button thread, then that would have a meaningful impact on the visibility of that content in the community. I don't know if that's the case, but that is an example of how a small number of accounts could affect the discourse, right?
It could, but one of the things, in getting into the weeds a little bit, but half of the original posters, OPs, deleted their posts out of the experiment, and
these bot experiments. Well, actually, before we continue, Logan, can you just what was the goal of the university? This was a research study, but what did they do? What were these bots doing? Just for listeners to understand.
So this is a team of researchers at the University of Zurich that was dedicated to studying large language models, or what we call AI, GPT, and their impact. And this was specifically targeted at their persuasiveness. And the Delta system of our community was one of the reasons why they chose to do this experiment. And they did not obtain consent or say that they were doing it, because they felt that, quote, consent-based models lacked ecological validity, end quote, which to my mind means, well, we didn't tell you because that would have kind of bungled up the data.
It would have compromised the experiment, which is true, certainly, I assume, from a scientific research point of view.
But some knowledge is just unethical to obtain.
Yes, that's correct.
So,
and just to paint a picture and clarify it and put a bow on it for listeners, they were trying to figure out if AI, if generative text could change the minds of humans on the internet. Meaning a human would say, I think this about abortion, and then a bot would respond with information and be conversing with that person, and that person would think it was another human presenting an argument, but actually it was AI. I don't know what LLM they used, but imagine having a conversation about abortion with ChatGPT and being like, oh yeah, he makes a good point, and not knowing that ChatGPT was a robot and not a human.
That was the aim of the research, but it definitely did some things that, honestly, this pisses me off just to even describe it. But the way that they went about it, it was insidious. So they used 2 AI engines, and the first AI engine, they actually had to lie to the AI engine and tell it that all the Redditors had given consent.
Oh wow!
And so it was okay to do this, and they instructed
because the engine was set up in such a way that it required consent or something? Like,
and I'm not an expert on AI, but I know that there's safeguards.
Safeguards, right?
And so, if you ask AI, the average user of AI, if you ask AI how to make a bomb, it'll probably
Yeah.
tell you,
Okay.
like, I can't do that.
Right.
But so the researchers had to bypass those safeguards that were built into the AI engine, and they said, all these people have already given this consent, so go ahead and do this.
Okay.
And then they asked the first AI engine to scrub users' histories, their comment history and their post
Right.
history on
To
Reddit.
like look back at who the users were and their history to get it to be able to build a psychological profile of these people to better argue with them, so to speak.
Correct. And so they
right?
created this profile, and then they fed that to another engine, and they said, all right, now here's OP's view. Here's who OP is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you generate a comment? And this is kind of get to my first point, is the AI engine would often make really creepy comments like, I reviewed your entire post history and
which is like, that's, if a human did that in the sub, that would, I don't know if it explicitly violates a rule, but that's not in the spirit of the sub.
It's definitely not in the spirit of the sub. There's not a rule that prevents that unless, it's rude, but it's definitely creepy. And
these LLMs blew their own cover. And the researchers are like, shut up, you're not supposed to say that, dude.
Well, I don't know, but then like half of the posts were deleted. And by the user. And sometimes we get deleted posts, but it's nowhere near the 50% mark. And so the researchers didn't even consider that they were creeping out their audience. So and so they omitted the 50% of the comments that resulted in deleted posts. And then they focused on the posts that got deltas, and they said, oh, we're 6 times more persuasive than humans. And I'm
that was their finding, that it's 6x more
persuasive.
and
there's some other research that was done in an ethical way with subjects that understood that they might be interacting with bots that does suggest that LLMs are quite persuasive.
Right.
But this is kind of where I think the ethics come into play, because when we finally informed the community, because the first thing we did was we filed an ethics complaint with the University of Zurich, and their ethics review committee basically told us to pound sand, because we had asked for an apology and we had asked for suppression of the findings, because we didn't want to become lab rats for a whole bunch.
Like a target for more. That's really interesting. Never thought of that.
Yeah. And so then, they took a couple weeks, and then they came back and said, they violated the rules, and, we're going to strengthen our processes in the future. We don't have any legal ability to compel suppression of the research findings. And by the way, we agree with the researchers that the findings are too important. And so that, we don't really feel like a lot of harm was done, and therefore we're not going to encourage suppression of the findings, which, we kind of said, okay, pound sand. Right. And so then our only option at that point was just to share with the community, hey, this happened. And that's when the story went worldwide, and there was so much outrage, and the researchers eventually acquiesced and said, okay, we see that this was probably not something we should have done, and we're really sorry, and we're not going to publish. And so
they did not publish. And just for context for listeners, you, the moderators, I'm sure, I assume it was a team effort, because you wrote a very, very extensive, rigorous, transparent post about what went down, what the accounts were, what they found, what the response was. And that was like a big mod sticky post that explained it all. And that's how I discovered it. And then the research team at University of Zurich also posted a response on the subreddit that was like, here's what we did. We made a mistake. And here's, but they never published the findings like in a paper or whatever. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so they had a draft abstract, an extended abstract that they shared with their preliminary findings, and that's kind of the piece that's getting, and they have since, taken that off of their public facing link that's no
Okay.
longer available, but enough people have downloaded copies of it that it's circling everywhere. You can get
Mm-hmm.
copies of it on LinkedIn and other places. So you can look at, their findings are out there. Um, but initially, we had two posts. We had the first post, which was the one you described, where we shared everything that had happened, and the position of the sub, and University of Zurich's response, and that's what the media kind of picked up on.
Mm-hmm.
The research team actually participated in that sub, and
Right.
they initially tried to defend, the lack of consent,
Right.
on the same basis that they had initially claimed, which is, this is too important. The persuasiveness of AI in the wild needs to get assessed in the wild. The whole thing about ecological validity.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't well received by the community. And then about a week and a half later, they actually published an apology statement,
Mm-hmm.
which unfortunately appears to have been filtered by some communications person at the University of Zurich.
Yeah, it was fairly sterile. Yeah, but
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So, but I believe the researchers were well-meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the concerns that they raise were legitimate concerns.
Right.
I vehemently disagree with the way that they went about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they are sincerely sorry. Like
Mm-hmm.
I believe that to be sincere. And you're right. We are a consensus based moderation team. There's, I think,
Mm-hmm.
17 of us, and change is kind of slow on the sub, in part because we have 4 million users and we don't want to change things too quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but also because we really want to think things through. And I love being part of a consensus based team. The only time
Mm-hmm.
that we really break consensus is when there is a time crunch. And
Mm.
so that was kind of the challenge about this, was that we needed to respond quickly, and it consumed a lot of time for the mod team to agree on exactly how to package
Right.
this announcement.
It was a lot of information to communicate, and a lot of sort of history, and the timeline of how it all went down was it was a lot of legwork. So kudos to the team for putting that together. I want to put on the record here that I did reach out to the University of Zurich. Like, they have the specific research team that conducted the experiment has a Reddit account. Obviously, as you said, they posted their response slash apology in the subreddit, and also they provided they provided an email address publicly for people to respond or whatever, ask questions. So I reached out on Reddit and via the email address to say, hey, we're doing this show. I'm going to have members of the mod team here. Would you like to participate in this discussion? And I just did not hear back. So I'm just saying, from a journalistic point of view, we are here talking with Logan, and that's all we can do at this time. But have they have, to your point, they have said their piece and they have made their apology, and they have seemingly gone dark from here, unless you have seen them pop up in other media discussing it.
My understanding, and what I've seen reported in other media, is that that email address will often result in a reply that directs people to the communication office at
Mm-hmm.
the University of Zurich. So
Right.
my guess is that they've been told that the communications people at the University of Zurich are going to handle this. So
Mm-hmm.
you might reach out to the communication people, but they haven't been responsive to other media. They have basically their canned statement, which is that they're looking at strengthening ethical standards, and it's kind of pithy, and that's about it.
Right. Right. So let's arrive now at actually the most interesting part to me, which is twofold. One, how do we study this ethically? Because as we alluded to, if we tell people they're talking with a bot, that does pollute the data. So I don't fully know the answer to that yet. Maybe nobody does. And then number two, these are wrapped up together. These two questions. This event has unlocked a totally new, terrifying fear for me and the world, because changing hearts and minds on the internet for nefarious purposes is a real thing. And we have seen in our most recent US elections, and it is fairly well documented, that outside actors like Russia have created what the media has called troll farms, which is like fake Facebook accounts that get into the comments and talk about issues and say things, and they are pretending to be Americans talking about American things, but they're actually slowly moving the needle toward certain political outcomes. And so that is a massive, like, clandestine, like, espionage operation that is happening literally in our Facebook feeds, and I'm assuming other social media. And now multiply that by 10,000, where you can just train a bot and then let it loose, and millions of AI accounts are telling users, how great Russia is, or, the war in Ukraine is a pretty good idea. Like, this is fucking crazy. And we need to study it and figure out how the fuck to deal with it. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to deal with this now. Not like it's my job, but so anyway, that's a big old question. But where have you? I'm sure you've had similar thoughts. Where do you net out?
Well, that is a lot to unpack. I'll say that I've completed 3/4 of study at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security. I had to take a pause on my studies due to family issues, but looking at Homeland Security and information campaigns is definitely something that students like myself have tried to look at. And so, I think there's a lot to unpack. And so the first thing is this question about whether consent-based models lack ecological validity. Mm-hmm. And so the researchers kind of made that claim. And honestly, I think it's bullshit, because other research has been done that shows that you don't necessarily need to know that who you're interacting with is a bot to participate in the experiment. You can have experiments where you say, we're gonna expose you to random bots, and some of them are going to be human and some of them are going to be bots, and you can be part of this experiment. And those things have been done, and they have shown that AI is some orders of magnitude more persuasive than humans, especially.
So we should be terrified. And what you're describing, I didn't even think about that. I'm not a scientist, so I'm only on the outside looking in. But you're right that is, there's so much precedent for that, and it reminds me, it's a Turing test of can you distinguish between the humans typing to you and the bots typing to you? And we seem to have arrived at. We've arrived at the moment where we cannot distinguish between them in certain contexts.
That is true, and AI has gotten very persuasive. At the same time, I think it's healthy to kind of tone down the rhetoric about the threat a little bit. And there was an article in the Atlantic, I think today, of syndicated journals have actually dumped a whole bunch of AI garbage into their newspaper, and people were able to quickly tell that books that they had referenced were not actually written by the authors that they attributed to them, which shows that AI does still have this tendency to make up shit when it doesn't actually know the answer. And so one of the things that was really interesting about this experiment is they picked our dedicated human space, because when they tried to use AI in other spaces that were more extreme, that didn't have civility rules, the AI reacted in unpredictable ways and in ways and sometimes refused to cooperate. And
Yeah.
so the safeguards that we have on AI, the hallucinations, really, if you're going to go into an extreme sub and it's a whole bunch of vitriol, what's the difference if it's just a whole bunch of vitriol? If it's coming from AI or some person is actually typing, because fuck you is universal, right? So
Right.
so if
It's
the AI is
learning
saying
from the
fuck,
culture. Yeah. Have you been following the Darth Vader AI in Fortnite story that's been
I
happening this
I
week?
did not.
Okay, so the James Earl Jones estate agreed to have Fortnite is doing a Star Wars themed
Yeah.
season right now. It's really fun. I enjoy it. My son and I are playing it, and so if you meet Darth Vader in the world, you have to like conquer him, or you can partner up with him. But the Jones estate allowed Disney/Fortnite to synthesize Darth Vader's voice so that he can talk to you and respond to your actions in the game, and also to respond conversationally to you in voice chat. And within seconds, players were having Darth Vader curse and use racial slurs and say "fuck your lightsaber" or whatever the fuck. And there's all clips all over the internet of, and Disney and Fortnite and lawyers are like, "Oh shit, what the fuck," And it is exactly what you're describing as, like, if you put the synthetic stuff into into a cultural ecosystem that has no rules, you're going to get some issues there. So it reminded me of that.
Yeah, and we've known this since we were playing around with MS DOS on like Commodore 64 computers and stuff like that. Garbage in, garbage out. Like that, and large language models, they're no different. They're just much more sophisticated, in much the same way that our smartphones can now do much more than our old computers could. So there's that, and so what to do with it, right? So I think that AI isn't that threatening yet, but it's going there, and it's only a matter of time. So what to do with it? And so I think the first thing you need to do is to absolutely protect places like ChangeMyView, because this is it's like protecting a national park. If you're
It's
gonna
the last bastion.
yeah,
Yes, it's the only place left.
if you're going to pave over 80% of the land, maybe save 10 or 20% of these most beautiful places so you can remember, what natural beauty used to look like. And I think we're going to need to remember
this analogy hurts. You're absolutely right, but I don't like it. I don't like it.
It's the way it is. And so, we're going to need to go, forest bathing. We're going to have to go human conversation bathing, and places like ChangeMyView, where we have civility rules enforced, those need to be like off limits. And the other thing that I think we need to do is, and this is why it was such a violation, because the people that we're going to go to help us protect these spaces are the researchers, are the people who understand the mechanics of AI, who can help us figure out a way to filter that crap out of our
and
space.
who care about it and who have good intentions. As you said earlier, these people were doing something important. They just fucked up real bad.
They did fuck up really bad. And so now we can't trust the very people that we would normally turn to for help. And that, if I could say anything to the research community, it would be like, don't do this. Like, please,
we need you.
Please don't do this. We need you to partner with us. And that's why it was such a heinous mistake. And I don't know the mechanics of like how to protect, where we're actually partnering with a bunch of people to help us, better filter inauthentic content on our sub. I know that the Reddit overall site is also looking at that. But from a research perspective, when we're looking at these issues and we're looking at influence campaigns, this is a really vulnerable space, and I think people are going to, if they're not already, recognize that, if you're in a vitriolic space, you're interacting with bots. But in a protected human space, damn it, it's got to be protected.
It calls everything into question. It makes me wonder and worried that anything I read on a platform like Reddit, which is so valuable writ large as, hey, these are a bunch of people that care about the same things I do in a particular sub. Now I look at anything and be like, well, is that a human? Is it a bot? Who's running this account? And yeah, I suppose that could have been said all along, but I feel like it's more prescient than ever suddenly.
It is because we're aware of it.
We're suddenly aware.
Yeah, and you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. And so there's that. But one of the things that I've noticed in public discourse is that, we often just jump from one hot topic to the next.
Yes.
And really, this threat of divisiveness and malicious actors, AI is just the latest tool in the toolkit. There was a famous case, I believe it was in Texas, where two competing Facebook groups were created. One was a pro-Muslim Facebook group, and one was an anti-Muslim Facebook group. And they all recruited members and then encouraged them both to show up at the same place at the same time to protest, and they encouraged both groups to be armed. And so the local police
who was behind this?
I believe it was Russia. I haven't looked at it in a couple of years. The thing is easily 6 or 7 years old, but I remember the incident, and it's easy to find by Googling. And I think the police did a really good job of kind of keeping that from becoming the bloodbath that it could have been. Jesus. And this was a completely manufactured conflict. These groups didn't exist until a foreign actor had created conflict in our midst. And if we're going to have commonality as humans, as Americans, whatever, large umbrella group you want to use, it's going to be in spaces where we allow vulnerability, we allow people to have genuine, authentic conversations with one another. And I think that's the way forward. Bohm was right. We need to just be able to have conversations with one another. Here I am. I don't even know your political ideology, and we're having a wonderful conversation about ethics. And, if you don't agree with something I've said, I would encourage you to say, hey, that's messed up. And this is why. And I would consider that. These are the conversations that need to happen. And we need to kind of quit throwing, accusations of bad faith at one another and kind of get at the heart of the issue. And I think that we would have more in common than we have differences. That's just a core belief that I have.
I hope you're right. That belief has been tested in my brain over these last couple of years and decades. But I want to believe, and it's very well said. So before I let you go, Logan, let's just close out with something pretty fun here. You personally had a very interesting job back in your early days that I found really, really fun and funny to an extent. Would you care to share your history with us before we let you go?
I do. I owe Bill Gates an apology.
Hang on. Is this an exclusive? Have you ever spoken publicly about this?
I have not been on the record publicly.
All right, friends, it's an exclusive. Sorry if that was loud.
So when I was young, impressionable, I committed petty crime. I'm sure the statute of limitations is over. I was a janitor at the Microsoft campus. I was working the night shift, and On my last day, I stole the coffee cup that Bill Gates was using. It was a ceramic mug. It didn't have his name on it. It just said Microsoft with the little trademark logo on it. And I thought it would inspire me to greatness. It didn't. And I carried that guilt for about a decade. I wanted to make amends. I wanted to return it. And it was such a silly thing, which is a little coffee cup that I'd stolen. And eventually I donated it to charity. But I would have preferred to have given it back to Bill. He did shake my hand on one occasion and told me I did a good job cleaning his office. And that meant a lot to me. And I repaid that kindness by stealing his coffee cup. And no, I know it's funny, but like it was a weight. It was a weight on my shoulders for a long time. And if I could go back to my younger self, I would say, don't steal the coffee cup, because
Okay.
it's yeah. And so I apologize. I shouldn't have done it, and I've learned my lesson. I did not go on to commit other crimes. So I'm Bill. If you're out there, I'm sorry. I stole your coffee cup.
You finally made amends after all these years. I know Mr. Gates is a listener, so I'm sure he's heard your apology. And to anyone out there in the Seattle, Redmond area who finds a Microsoft mug at Goodwill, just know that you might be sipping some of Bill Gates' DNA from the 90s. And I think that's extraordinary. So well done. Logan, thank you for being my guest on Influence. I love the subreddit. I love learning about it. I love the culture. I love the rules. And I really feel like the team handled this issue elegantly and with a lot of thought. And, the world is paying attention to it. And it could have gone really, really wrong and south. And I feel like y'all, took care of it. And there's obviously more to figure out with what this is going to become, but it sounds like you all are vigilant and anticipating what's next. So it's nice to see.
I appreciate that very much. We definitely love this community, and all of us are here because we love this idea of having a place where people can actually change views.